Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, be sure to drop your thoughts, feelings, and lessons in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Let's get into it. What would you do if your wife laughed and told her whole family she regretted marrying you every single day? That is exactly what happened to me at a backyard barbecue in Dallas, Texas. Smoke rose off the grill, people held beers, everybody smiled like nothing could go wrong. Then my wife, Danielle, said it out loud, casual and clear. I regret marrying him every day. People laughed. Someone clinked a glass. I did not laugh. I set my drink down, looked her in the eyes, and said, "So do I, and that's why I'm ending it today." Her smile died right there. The moment the words left my mouth, the table changed. A beer froze halfway to a man's lips. Someone's fork hovered in the air like it forgot where it was going. Danielle's father did not shout. He just narrowed his eyes, that quiet look fathers use when a backyard starts turning into a courtroom. Danielle tried to laugh it off. "Babe, come on. I'm kidding. It's a joke." I did not raise my voice. I did not give her the fight she wanted. I leaned back calm enough to scare her and asked, "Were you?" The question pulled the oxygen out of the space. Her smile twitched. Her eyes darted, hunting for another laugh to save her. Cousins, aunties, her mom, her dad, everybody waited for me to fold. I did not. "You've been making me the punchline for years," I said. "And you got comfortable because I kept swallowing it." She opened her mouth, then closed it. I nodded once. "We're not doing this here," I said, steady. "But understand me. What you just said, that doesn't say itself." Silence spread, thick and slow. I could feel it. The next thing I said would change what her family believed about her, and about me too. Danielle sat there looking like the perfect wife. Bright smile, easy laugh. The kind of woman who works a room without breaking a sweat. At a suburban barbecue, she was pure charm. If you only knew her from daylight and small talk, you would swear I was the luckiest man at that table. That is why her jokes worked. They sounded harmless to everyone else, but I knew the pattern. It was not one big betrayal you can point at. It was the drip. Little comments that made me smaller. Eye rolls. Corrections in public like I was a child. Death by 1,000 cuts is quiet enough that you start questioning your own gut. And I kept doing what I had always done. I showed up. I paid bills. I kept the lights on. I kept the mortgage current. I told myself I was being strong, absorbing pressure, keeping peace, being steady. But sitting there while everyone watched her face tighten, it hit me clean. My silence was not strength anymore. It was surrender. I had not snapped because of one line at a barbecue. I snapped because that line matched what I had already seen in private and what I had already saved, waiting on my phone like a loaded truth. That is when her cousin, Keisha, leaned forward with a grin. Keisha talks like every family gathering is a podcast. "Okay," she said, "so are we joking or are we doing real talk now?" Danielle tried to grab the room back. She threw out another little line about me being too steady, too predictable, like stability was something to mock. A few people let out awkward chuckles, the kind you do when you don't want to pick a side. I did not look at Keisha. I looked at Danielle's mother. "Have you ever noticed?" I asked quietly. "She only brings me up when she needs a punchline." Her mother's smile slipped, and she had no quick answer. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Danielle shifted in her chair, suddenly aware the spotlight had moved. I nodded almost gently. "And before anyone tells me I'm misunderstanding her," I added, "I've got screenshots." The laughter did not just stop. It turned into suspicion, pointed straight at her. Danielle's eyes flashed like I had pulled a weapon at the table. "Screenshots of what?" She snapped, too loud, too fast. I kept my voice even. That calm did more damage than yelling ever could. "Of you," I said, "talking about our marriage like it's a joke and a trap." Then I quoted it word for word. "Marriage is a prison." I let the sentence hang. Danielle's father's face tightened. He did not look at me. He looked straight at his daughter. "Danielle," he said low and sharp, "did you say that?" She did not answer. No excuse. No laugh. No comeback. Just silence, like her throat finally understood the consequences. I nodded once. "I'm not here to make a scene," I said. "I'm here to end one." I pushed my chair back and stood. The backyard buzzed with panic, whispers, somebody clearing their throat, a chair scraping concrete. Then I walked into the house, knowing the next minutes would turn her whole family against the version of her they thought they knew. Inside the house, the noise dropped behind the door like someone hit mute. I walked straight to the bathroom, turned on cold water, and splashed my face until my skin stung. In the mirror, I did not look furious. I looked lighter, like I had been carrying weight so long I forgot it was there. Through the window, I heard her mother's voice crack. "Sweetheart, what did you do?" Danielle answered fast, breathy, spinning the truth into something cute enough to survive a barbecue. I dried my hands slowly. No rush. No panic. That was new. When I stepped back outside, her father met my eyes like a man trying to keep his family from splitting in half. He started to speak. I lifted a hand, gentle but final. "Sir, this isn't your burden." Then I looked at Danielle. "We'll talk in private," I said, "but understand something." I let the words sit cold between us. This has already started. The look on her face told me she finally believed me. The drive home felt like moving through fog even though the sky was clear. Danielle's hands squeezed the steering wheel until her knuckles went pale. She kept glancing at me like she was waiting for the old version of me to show up, angry, begging, apologizing for making things awkward. Finally, she broke. "You really embarrassed me back there." I did not turn my head. "You embarrassed yourself." She let out that sharp little laugh she uses when she's trying to climb back on top. "Marcus, you're overreacting." I watched the road lines slide under the headlights. "No," I said. "They didn't know you didn't mean it, and neither did I." Her voice tightened. "It was a joke." "That wasn't a joke," I answered, calm enough to cut. "That was a confession." You said the quiet part out loud. The car went silent again, heavier than any shouting match. When we pulled into our driveway, the porch light hit the front of the house like a spotlight on something we had been pretending was fine. 2 cars. Clean siding. A garage full of tools and holiday boxes. The kind of place people call making it. And yet when the engine shut off, it felt colder than the night air. Danielle didn't get out right away. "So that's it," she said. "You're really ending it?" I slipped my keys into my pocket and finally looked at her. "No," I said. "You ended it the moment you decided I was safest as a joke." She exhaled hard like she had been wronged. I was stressed. I didn't mean it. I stepped out, then paused by the hood, letting the quiet do the work. "You've been saying it for months," I said, "to different people in different ways. Tonight was just the first time you did it with an audience." Her head snapped toward me and the color drained from her face, because that was the moment she realized this wasn't about one line at a barbecue. This was about what I already knew, and what I still hadn't said out loud. Inside, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and old routines. Danielle followed me in like she could still talk her way back into control. She crossed her arms, chin up, trying to turn it into a normal argument. "Who told you?" she asked sharp. "Who's been in our business?" I didn't flinch. "Doesn't matter," I said. "The point is you said it." She scoffed. "So you're just going to throw everything away because somebody repeated something I vented?" I set my keys on the counter and faced her. I didn't throw anything away. I held it together. I carried the mortgage, the bills, the life we built, while you treated me like a placeholder you could mock whenever you needed applause. Her eyes narrowed. "You always make yourself the victim." I almost smiled because it was the oldest trick in her book. "I'm not a victim," I said. "I'm just done." Then I let the truth land, simple and brutal. Love doesn't survive disrespect. It starves. For the first time, she didn't have a quick laugh to cover it. She stood there like if she talked long enough, I would fold. Like every argument we ever had was just a storm I was supposed to wait out. Her voice sharpened. "So what, Marcus? You're really going to blow up our life over words?" I didn't answer right away. I walked to the bookshelf, slid my fingers behind a binder I had hidden in plain sight, and pulled out a folder so thick it made a dull slap when it hit the table. Bank statements. mortgage history, utility bills, credit card records. Every payment, every transfer, every quiet sacrifice with a date attached. Danielle's eyes widened. What is that? Why do you have that? Because I prepared, I said, calm like I was explaining the weather. For the day you made it impossible to stay. She stared at the folder like it was betrayal. Then she reached for the only card she thought still worked. You love me. I held her gaze and let the truth land without drama. I did, I said, past tense. Her face cracked, not from sadness first, but from shock, like she just realized love is not a leash. Once that word left my mouth, there was no way back. Danielle backed away like the air in the room had turned on her. She shook her head once, twice, like she could shake the moment loose. Then she spun and went upstairs. A door slammed hard enough to rattle picture frames in the hallway. I didn't follow. That was the old me, the fixer, the man who chased her tears like they were my responsibility. I stayed downstairs at the kitchen table, listening to the clock tick like a hammer. 1 second at a time. Driving the point home. This is real. I grabbed a notepad and started writing. Not because I wanted to be cold, but because I needed to be clear. Clothes. Toiletries. Documents. Camera. Keys. The things that were mine. The things I have done earning. I stared at the list and whispered something I had never allowed myself to believe. Peace is not quitting. Sometimes peace is survival. I packed a small bag, zipped it shut, and walked down that hallway like it belonged to a stranger. Behind the bedroom door, she was still crying. I left anyway. I drove with no plan, streetlights, empty lanes, my thoughts finally speaking without her cutting in. No music, no podcasts, just the hum of tires and the weight of what I refused to carry anymore. My phone kept lighting up on the passenger seat. Danielle again. I pulled into a 24/7 diner outside Knoxville, Tennessee, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and a neon sign that flickers like it's tired. I ordered black coffee and stared out the window. The phone buzzed again and I answered. Marcus? She said, please, can we talk? We did talk, I said, quiet and flat. You didn't listen. Her voice broke into that familiar panic. I didn't mean it. We can do counseling. We can fix this. We already tried, I said. You treated it like a debate. She started to say my name the way it used to pull me back. I didn't let it. I'm done, I said, and I hung up. The diner suddenly felt too bright. I knew if I went home in the morning, she would be waiting, ready to rewrite the night like it never happened. Morning came too clean for what we had done. Sunlight poured through the living room windows like it had no idea our marriage was bleeding out. Danielle was already there on the couch, eyes puffy, hair pulled back like she had been awake all night rehearsing. You're my husband, she said the second I walked in, like it was a legal spell. I set my keys down gently. Not anymore. She flinched hard like the words had weight. You can't just decide that for both of us. I looked at her for a long second, long enough to remember every time I swallowed a remark to keep the peace. You decided, I said, every time you called me an anchor, every time you made me the punchline, every time you told people I was holding you back. I was venting, she snapped. No, I said. You were being honest. Now you're scared of what honesty costs. She stood up fast. So what now? I didn't answer with a speech. I walked upstairs because the next thing I did was going to make it permanent. I opened the closet like I was reaching into a life I had already outgrown. The suitcase thumped onto the bed. Shirts. Jeans. The belt. Simple things that suddenly felt like evidence. Danielle stood in the doorway, arms crossed tight, trying to look tough while her voice shook. You really planned this, she said. You were preparing to leave me. I didn't stop folding. Preparing isn't the same as planning, I said. Planning is what you do when you want something to happen. Preparing is what you do when you're tired of being blindsided. Her eyes flashed. You're going to regret this. That line used to scare me. It used to make me think I was about to lose the best thing I would ever get. Now it just sounded like a threat from someone who never respected what I carried. I zipped the suitcase halfway and finally looked at her. If this was good, I said, voice low, steady, I'd still be trying. She went still, like she had been waiting for anger and got something worse. Clarity. I didn't slam doors. I didn't yell goodbye. I carried my bag down the stairs, past framed photos on the wall, smiles frozen in time like they belonged to strangers. Danielle followed me to the bottom step, but she didn't touch me. She just watched, eyes wide, like she couldn't believe I was actually walking out. The night air outside felt sharp and clean. I drove to my friend Terrence's place by Lake Norman in North Carolina, a modest house where the porch light always worked and nobody asked questions first. He opened the door in sweatpants, looked me up and down, and let out a dry laugh. "You look like you got hit by a truck," he said. I exhaled, and it felt like my ribs unclenched for the first time in months. "You got room for one more?" He stepped aside. "Yeah. Come on." That first night I slept not perfectly, just uninterrupted. No tension in the walls. No footsteps upstairs. No waiting for the next jab. Peace showed up like something I hadn't earned. And that is how I knew it wouldn't last, because the moment you stop cleaning up somebody else's mess, they start making a bigger one. For 3 days, Danielle called like it was her full-time job. First it was crying, soft, shaky, pleading. Then it was bargaining, counseling, date nights, promises she had never kept before. By day 3, it turned sharp. Accusations. Blame. Like if she couldn't pull me back with love, she would drag me back with guilt. I answered less and less. On the 3rd day, I stopped completely. On the 4th, I was in a meeting at work in Houston, Texas. A conference room with stale coffee and people pretending to care about quarterly numbers. When the receptionist buzzed my phone, her voice was careful, the way people sound when they're about to hand you a problem. "Marcus, there's a woman here asking for you. She says it's urgent." My stomach dropped. I already knew. I walked out to the lobby and there she was. Danielle. Hair messy, eyes red, clutching a manila folder like it was a weapon. Heads turned. Conversations died. The glass doors behind her reflected the whole scene like a mirror I couldn't break. She didn't just show up. She crossed a line on purpose. I didn't argue in the lobby. I didn't give her the satisfaction of an audience. I pushed the door open and motioned her outside where the parking lot heat hit like a slap. She followed, still gripping that folder, breathing hard like she sprinted here in pure panic. 5 minutes, she said. That's all I'm asking. Not here, I answered. Her face tightened. You can't do this in front of them. She nodded toward the building like I was the one bringing shame to my workplace. I stared at her, then said it plain. I didn't ask you to come. That landed hard because it flipped the script. She wasn't the woman fighting for her marriage anymore. She was the person who couldn't stand losing control. She lifted the folder a little, and her voice went calm in a way that felt practiced. I talked to a lawyer, she said. And in that moment, I realized she wasn't here to apologize. She was here to negotiate my surrender. Danielle held that folder like it gave her authority. My attorney says I'm entitled to half, she said. Half the house, half the savings, half of everything. She waited for me to flinch, to bargain, to panic. I didn't. I nodded once. Good, I said. So did I. Her eyes widened. You what? I held her stare and let the sentence drop clean. I filed yesterday. It was like the ground shifted under her feet. For the first time, she wasn't performing. She was calculating, fast and desperate, trying to rewind a reality that does not rewind. You can't do that, she snapped. That's not fair. I almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. Fair never lived in our marriage, I said, low and steady. I carried the load and you carried the jokes. She opened her mouth, searching for the lever that always moved me, love, guilt, rage, anything. But the power had already changed hands, and she knew it. When I walked back into the building, the lobby felt smaller. People looked away like eye contact might make them part of it. A few coworkers pretended to study their phones. Someone whispered my name like it was a headline. I didn't blame them. I went straight to my desk and worked. It sounds cold, but it's the truth. Work gave me something she never did. Clear tasks, clear outcomes, no mind games. After a while, my body unclenched. I slept through the night at Terrence's. I ate like a person again. I could breathe without waiting for the next hit. And then Danielle went quiet. No calls. No texts. Nothing. Most people would call that peace. I wanted to believe it was over, but silence from someone like Danielle is not surrender. It is strategy. That quiet wasn't an ending. It was the pause before the next move. And deep down, I felt it coming the way you feel thunder before you hear it. 2 weeks of silence almost convinced me she was done. Almost. I pulled into the lot after work, the air still warm, my mind already halfway to the lake and a quiet dinner. Then I saw her. Danielle was sitting on the hood of my car like she owned it. Legs crossed, arms loose, chin lifted. Not crying. Not pleading. Smiling. That same smile she wore at the barbecue right before she cut me down. The "I'm still in control" smile. Tears are honest. That smile is a plan. "You've been ignoring me," she said, like I was the one breaking rules. I stepped out slowly and didn't give her the reaction she came for. She slid off the hood, heels clicking on the pavement. Her eyes scanned me like she was looking for the old Marcus, the man who would explain himself, soften, negotiate. But I could see it plain now. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here to fight for leverage. "You don't get to decide this," she snapped, following me toward the door like the conversation was a leash. "You can't just leave and think that's the end." I unlocked the door, calm on purpose. "I didn't make the mess," I said. "I just stopped cleaning it up." She scoffed, but her eyes stayed sharp, working angles. "My lawyer says I'm entitled to half." I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't even look surprised. "I kept records," I said, stepping inside. "Every bill, every payment, every transfer, every time I carried what you called boring." Her jaw tightened. "So you've been planning to destroy me?" I turned and met her gaze. "No. I planned to protect myself." She searched my face for anger, for anything she could hook into. When she couldn't find it, she changed tactics, voice turning cold. "You're heartless now." I almost smiled. "No," I said. "I'm just not bleeding anymore." And that is when her smile finally slipped, because calm is the one thing she could not control. Danielle's voice sharpened again, like she could cut her way back into control. "You were controlling," she said. "You always had to be right. You made me feel small." I didn't react. I let her words hang there. Then I said it slowly so she couldn't twist it. "No, Danielle. You made yourself small by standing on the person who was holding you up." It landed different, not like an insult, like a diagnosis. For the first time all night, she didn't have a comeback. No laugh. No spin. Just a blink that lasted too long, like her brain was searching for the old script and coming up empty. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. When she spoke again, the edge was gone. "I don't want to do this alone," she admitted, like it slipped out. I nodded, not cruel, just honest. "You've been doing it alone for a long time," I said. "You just didn't notice because I was still in the room." She frowned. "What does that even mean?" I met her eyes. "It means I wasn't your partner. I was your wallpaper." The words sat there ugly and true. I watched it sink in. Her face tightened like she had been slapped. Not because it hurt, because it exposed her. She straightened fast, grabbing whatever pride she had left. "You'll regret this," she said. "You'll see what happens when you make me your enemy." I didn't step back. I didn't raise my voice. I looked at her the way you look at a door you finally decided to walk through. "I already did," I said. She hesitated, confused, because that wasn't the reaction she came for. Then I finished it calm and clean. "You were my wife." Simple. No curse words. No lecture. But it hit her harder than shouting ever did. Her eyes flinched first, then her whole body followed. She turned and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls seemed to shake. I stood there in the quiet and noticed something that surprised me. I wasn't shaking. Not even a little. And in that stillness, I felt the beginning of something I hadn't had in years. Peaceful silence. The kind that doesn't beg you to fix it. The kind that just lets you breathe. The weeks after that were quieter than I expected. Not happy. Just stable. I started going to the gym again. Nothing heroic. Just enough to feel my body come back online. I worked late on purpose. I met Terrence for coffee by the water. I called a couple old friends I had let drift because marriage took all my time. It was the first time in years my days didn't revolve around managing Danielle's mood. She tried different doors, texts through mutual friends, little checking in messages with fake kindness. I didn't answer, not out of spite, out of self-respect. If I replied, I would be back in the role. The fixer. The man who smooths things over. Then one Friday afternoon, my phone rang and I saw her brother's name, Andre. Andre and I weren't close, but he wasn't dramatic either. That is why I picked it up. She's at Mom's, he said, crying for hours. I stared at the wall and felt that old reflex rise, rush in, save the day. I swallowed it. That's not my job anymore, I said. And the moment I said it, I knew I had crossed a line I couldn't cross. That night, I stood on Terrence's back deck and watched the sun go down over the lake. The sky burned orange, then cooled into purple like a bruise fading. For the first time, my mind was quiet. No arguing in my head. No replaying conversations. No planning how to make it better. Just stillness. I went to bed thinking maybe that was the end. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. Not a soft knock. A careful one, like whoever was on the other side was hoping I'd answer before they lost their nerve. I opened it and there she was. Danielle. Eyes swollen. Makeup smeared. No smile this time. No lawyer folder. Just her, standing in daylight looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Please, she whispered. Just hear me out. I should have closed the door. I knew that. Curiosity is a stupid thing, but it is powerful. I stepped back and let her in. And as she crossed the threshold, I realized this wasn't going to be another fight. This was going to be her last move. Danielle stepped inside like she was walking into a church, quiet, careful, afraid to touch anything. In her hands was a small box taped shut, corners worn like it had been opened and closed a dozen times. She set it on the coffee table between us like an offering. Everything you ever gave me, she said. Letters. Pictures. The watch. The little stuff I thought she didn't notice. That was the play. Nostalgia. If she could drag me back to who we used to be, she wouldn't have to face who she became. I didn't reach for it. I sat with my hands in my lap, steady as stone. Keep it, I said. Her throat tightened. Marcus, I'm trying. I know, I answered, but I'm not going to be softened into staying. She swallowed hard and looked down at the box like it could save her. Every time I see this, she whispered, I remember what I ruined. I nodded once. Not cruel. Just clear. Because the hardest part wasn't the box. It was realizing she finally understood, and it was still too late. Danielle's shoulders shook, but she didn't fall apart the way she used to. It was quieter than that, like grief with nowhere to go. She stared at the box and said, almost to herself, I get it now. I lost you. I didn't correct her. I told the truth she avoided for years. You lost the man who loved you more than his own peace, I said. That's what you lost. Looked up, eyes glassy. And you? What did you lose? I exhaled slowly. I lost the version of me that thought disrespect was the price of love, I said. The man who kept smiling while he was shrinking. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Do you hate me? I held her gaze and felt nothing sharp. No revenge. No heat. Just distance. No, I said. I don't hate you. I paused, letting it land the way it needed to. I just don't belong to this story anymore. The silence after that wasn't punishment. It was closure. Danielle stood up slowly like her knees didn't fully trust her. She didn't grab the box. She didn't ask me to walk her out. She moved toward the door with the quiet, defeated dignity people wear when they run out of tricks. Her hand paused on the doorknob. She didn't turn around at first. When she finally did, her eyes were dry. Too dry. I hope she makes you happy, she said. For a second, I honestly didn't know what she meant. Who? I asked. Her mouth tightened, not in anger, more like acceptance with teeth. Whoever comes next. It wasn't a blessing. It was a blade. But it was also the closest thing to accountability she had ever offered, admitting there would be a next and it wouldn't be her. I nodded once because there was nothing to argue with. She opened the door, stepped out, and closed it gently behind her. The house went quiet, so quiet it felt like snowfall. And in that silence, I understood. Some goodbyes don't explode. They freeze. Time didn't heal me overnight. It just moved. The divorce rolled forward like a slow train you can't stop once it leaves the station. Paperwork. Signatures. Meetings that felt more like autopsies than conversations. Danielle and I didn't scream anymore. We didn't have to. The truth was already settled. I kept my life simple. Work, gym, Terrence's place by the lake. Early nights. Black coffee. Slow, steady rebuilding. And then I met Naomi. Not in some dramatic way. No fireworks. Just real life. A friend of a friend, a quiet conversation that didn't turn into a power game. She listened without scanning for weaknesses. She laughed without it sounding like a weapon. She didn't need to win every moment. That messed with my head at first. I kept waiting for the punchline, the little jab, the just kidding after a cut. It never came. One night, driving home after a simple dinner, it hit me. I wasn't tense. I was safe. Not because love suddenly got easy, but because this time, love didn't come with fear. One evening, Naomi and I cooked like it was the most normal thing in the world. Pasta on the stove. Garlic in the air. Her hair tied up. Music low enough to talk over. No tension. No careful wording. Just two people sharing a kitchen without walking on eggshells. She glanced at me while she stirred the sauce and smiled. "You smile differently now," she said. "Like you're coming home." That hit harder than I expected because home used to mean a mortgage, a porch light, a garage full of boxes. But with Danielle, I was never home. I was surviving, managing moods, measuring words, taking hits, calling it love. With Naomi, respect wasn't something I had to earn back after every joke. It was just there. I was about to say something honest when my phone buzzed on the counter. One name lit up the screen. Danielle. The room didn't change, but my body did. My chest tightened like an old lock turning. Naomi didn't ask questions. She just looked at my face. And I realized the past doesn't disappear. It waits until you finally feel happy, then it tries to collect. The next day, a handwritten letter showed up. Not a text. Not an email. Actual paper. Thick envelope. My name written in Danielle's familiar slant, like she wanted nostalgia to do the talking before her words even reached me. I sat at the table and opened it slowly. The first paragraph was an apology. The second was history. By the third, I could feel the hook. The version of us she wished I would remember, the version that let her get away with disrespect because I called it commitment. I stopped reading. Just stopped. "No," I said out loud to an empty room. I walked to the fireplace, struck a match, and watched the flame catch like it had been waiting. Then I held the letter over the fire and let the edge curl. Ink warped. Sentences buckled. Her careful handwriting turned into black lace. I didn't feel rage. I felt released. The paper folded into itself, then collapsed into ash. That was the real goodbye. Not the barbecue. Not the filings. The moment I burned the anchor she kept throwing back into my life. The ashes drifted down and settled like gray snow. No anger. No satisfaction. Just quiet, the kind you get when a long argument finally runs out of air. I realized I wasn't grieving Danielle anymore. I was grieving the idea of her, the woman I thought I married, the promise I kept trying to protect. The real thing, the real marriage, had been built on disrespect disguised as joking, contempt disguised as stress, and my patience turned into a free pass. I spent years calling it love because I didn't want to admit I was being slowly erased in my own house. That night, staring into the last glow of the fire, I made it simple. Peace wasn't a mood. It was a rule, a line I wasn't going to cross again for anyone. I said it out loud just to hear it become real. Freedom doesn't show up when someone finally treats you right. Freedom shows up when you finally realize you should have left the first time you were made to feel small, and you choose yourself anyway. I kept thinking back to that barbecue, the smoke, the laughter, the way one sentence can crack a whole life. I regret marrying him every day. People heard it as a joke. I heard it as a verdict. Here is what I learned the hard way. A man doesn't need fancy romance to stay. He needs 3 things: security, love, respect. Security is the mortgage paid, the lights on, the feeling you can breathe in your own home. Love is knowing you're not alone in the room, knowing you're wanted, not just used. Respect is the foundation under both. Without it, love doesn't die in one big moment. It starves slowly. When you don't feel like you belong, you start living like a guest in your own house. And when self-respect dies, what's left isn't marriage. It's a performance, 2 people playing roles for the outside world while one of them quietly disappears. That is why I can say this without hate. I didn't divorce a person. I divorced a role. The scariest thing isn't getting left. It's being disrespected in public and realizing everyone laughed along like it was normal. A joke can be true wearing a mask. Once you see the mask slip, you cannot pretend you didn't. That barbecue taught me my line wasn't money or sex or even loyalty. My line was respectful. Because without respect, everything else turns into a job you're never paid for. Being a man doesn't mean you scream louder. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away without begging for permission. I used to think revenge had to be loud. Slam the door. Say the cruel thing. Make sure everybody knows you got hurt. But the truth is, the quiet goodbye is sometimes the loudest revenge because it leaves nothing to argue with. No scene to replay. No opening to twist. I didn't hit Danielle back with words. I didn't try to ruin her. I just disappeared from the role she built for me. I stopped being the man she could insult and still count on. That is not cruelty. That is the consequence. And I didn't win against her. If you are keeping score in a marriage, you already lost. What I won was something else. My fear. The fear of being alone. The fear of starting over. The fear of what people would say. Peace costs. It costs comfort. It costs the familiar. But it's still the most valuable thing a man can buy back. I still see it sometimes. The letter curling in the fireplace, ink collapsing, paper turning weightless, ash drifting down like snow. That was the sound of my old life finally letting go. And that sentence, "So do I," marked my life like a scar, not because it was clever, but because it was the first time I said the truth without cushioning it for someone else's comfort. A lot of men think they have to be perfect to deserve love. You don't. You just have to be treated with basic respect. You can be tired. You can be steady. You can be a working man who pays bills and keeps showing up. None of that makes you disposable. If respect isn't there, don't call it love. Call it what it is: convenience. A person using your patience as a safety net. I'm not proud of how long I stayed, but I'm grateful for what it taught me because it saved the rest of my life. Men go quiet all the time, not because it doesn't hurt, but because we were raised to carry it. Keep your head down. Pay the bills. Don't complain. Be the rock. For a while, that works. You tell yourself you're being strong. But carrying isn't the same as being stepped on. There's a difference between sacrifice and slow erasure, between patience and permission. If you don't draw a line early, your heart doesn't explode. It just shuts down. One day you wake up and realize you've been living with someone, but you haven't felt respected in years. That is why I'm saying this is a warning, not a speech. Set your line while you can still feel, while you still have energy to fight for your dignity. Don't wait until you're numb. Numb is harder to come back from than anger. And the part that keeps me up sometimes is this. A lot of men never get their moment at the table. A lot of men never get to say, "So do I." They just stay forever. I can still hear the laughter from that picnic table, the clink of a glass, the casual way people laugh when they think they're watching a harmless joke. That was the moment I died a little in front of everybody. It was also the moment I started coming back to life because for once I didn't pretend it was okay. I didn't draw a line because I wanted drama. I drew it because I wanted to live. I chose 3 things I should have chosen sooner: security so I could breathe, belonging so love felt like home instead of work, and self-respect so I didn't have to shrink to keep peace. If you take nothing else from my story, take this. You have a right to be respected in your own home. Not tolerated. Not joked about. Respected. Because the moment respect is gone, everything else becomes performance. One public humiliation at a backyard barbecue turned into a truth I couldn't unhear. I stopped bargaining. I set a boundary. I walked out. I closed the door for good, first with paperwork, then with ashes. Love can't breathe without respect, not long term, not in the real world. If you stay silent too long, you don't keep peace. You slowly lose yourself piece by piece until you're living as a role instead of a man. I didn't leave a person. I left disrespect. Script. If this story hit you, share it with one person who needs to hear this lesson about respect. And drop your own moment. When did you realize it was over? I read the comments, and your story might help someone still sitting at that table. The end.